If you've been affected by a recent disaster like the LA fires here in LA, please stay tuned. We're going to be talking about the best way to pick up the pieces after a disaster, how to help others when they've experienced a disaster, and keeping your emotional and mental health intact as you sift through the psychological rubble. And a warning to people who might be watching the video: if you're bothered by images of LA fires, you may listen to the podcast. All the information will be the same there. And welcome to Off the Couch, where psychology meets everyday life. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, psychologist, here with producer Brian Gomez.
Hey, you guys.
And Tony on the board.
Hello, hello.
So there's Noah in the room. Hi, Noah.
Hi, how you doing?
All right. But today on Off the Couch, we have a very serious topic. This week, we're going to be talking about coping after a disaster. We're going to be talking about the LA fires, which have been huge, and we're going to be talking about them compared to some other major disasters that have happened. Common psychological reactions, what you can do if you experienced the fires, if you had to evacuate or you had your house burned, what you can do to cope, and especially for so many people who've wanted to help, what others can do to help, and also recognizing when you or someone else may need psychological help. First, if you're watching this to get information, we can start with outside of life-threatening emergencies, which is 911. I want you all to know that there is a crisis and suicide lifeline, which is 988. It's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week crisis confidential helpline for mental health. It's available across the United States. You can also call or text 988 or go to 988lifeline.org to chat with a counselor. Another is the Disaster Distress Helpline. Disaster Distress Helpline is 800-985-5990. This is a very unique telephone number that's the first national hotline dedicated to providing 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week, year-round crisis counseling for people who've experienced emotional distress related to natural or human-caused disasters and emergencies. And also, for those of you who are on the ground who may have lost a house or who may be displaced, there is 211. Which is a local information and referral service. This is across the United States and Canada, and it provides emergency food and shelter information, mental health support and counseling, and health services and insurance assistance and housing assistance and job training resources. This is going to be an immensely important telephone number to all of those displaced. So let's talk. First, let's do a shout out, because here in LA, we've been hearing nothing about the destruction and the disaster. So I want to talk first and give a shout out to all the helpers here in Los Angeles. The first is friend of the show, David Chokachi. David Chokachi, you may know him best from Baywatch, After Baywatch. He's in many movies and TV shows. He is part of an organization called Best Friends Animal Society, and he has participated in getting animals out of the fire zones and to safety. If you don't know, we talked about in the past, David lives right by all of the fires. He lives up in Malibu, where a lot of people live, and they were extremely hurt by the fires. Also, there have been other people, from countless people who you just don't know, giving water, giving food. I can't tell you the number of people who are dedicating time, giving all of their resources in every way they can, whether it's money or clothes or food, flashlights, backpacks. It's been incredible, the amount of help that's been out there. So LA, when it feels a disaster, the people really come together. It was actually a really beautiful thing to watch. So let's talk about the LA fires. Brian, you were here for the LA fires?
Yep, I was here too. That was a crazy week long, pretty much, it felt like.
It was absolutely incredible. And Tony, were you up? Where were you?
I mean, I was
up in the valley,
Santa Clarita, where we were safe and far enough away.
This time, because you guys have had other fires.
We do get a lot of fires up there, for sure. In fact, many of the freeways are closed a lot because they go across the freeways there. But the station here, even though it wasn't close to the fires, the smoke was definitely very bad here from the Altadena fires.
Yeah, the Altadena fires, which were called the Eaton fires. Yeah. This is an immense fire that hit a working and middle class community called Altadena, which is actually a really cute, wonderful little community just east of Pasadena, and if you don't know it. And we also had the other major fire was the Palisades fire, which was on the other side of town toward the coast, which hit primarily Pacific Palisades and parts of Malibu and surrounding areas. But also we had many, many other fires. One was the Sunset Fire, which was near my house. But the Sunset Fire was really put out very quickly, so it's not even worth talking about. Yes, thank goodness it was, and it did not damage any structures. So when we look at the grand scheme of things, that particular fire was not a big problem, but these other two were. Let's just talk about the scope of things so far. As of this recording, which is on January 20th, the fires are still burning. So we don't have complete containment of these fires. So although these started back in January 7th, the fires are still burning, but we have close to containment, which containment means, just for anyone who's curious, it doesn't mean the fire's out. It just means they have a perimeter around the fire that the fire's not going to spread more. So they've got it contained to a certain area. Let's talk about so far what we know. The area affected in LA is over 40,000 acres burned across multiple fires. That's including Palisades and Eaton. It's already consumed more than 12,300 structures, according to the United States Geological Survey. The San Francisco Chronicle says it's probably closer to 15,000. Fatalities at this point, just before this recording, at least 28 confirmed deaths. That's 27 directly due to the fire and a 28th that's indirectly due to the fire. And that's just as we know right now. We expect that to rise. We don't know the cause per se, especially there could be multiple causes of these different fires. However, extreme Santa Ana winds and prolonged dry conditions contributed to a rapid fire spread, and we expect this one to cost more than any in the past. $20 billion estimate so far. That's certainly expected to rise, making it potentially the costliest wildfire in the United States. So this is a really, really big fire, like by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's tough for people around in other parts of the country, certainly in the United States, to imagine the magnitude of the damage that was done here, because LA is so big. I was on YouTube and I was watching a video from a guy in Tennessee. I'm hungry for fire information, so I was always watching this, but it was a guy from Tennessee who is saying there's a mass exodus out of LA, the whole city is burned, everyone's moving to Nashville and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, really? Because there are more people in the metro area of Los Angeles than in the entire state of Tennessee. And that would be kind of physically impossible for us all to up and move over there. But it was just this kind of outrage, look how bad they are and look how good we have it machine that's out there. It's just really disgusting to me. But I guess people have to get their clicks no matter what. It got my click, and I watched his video because I was suckered in. But we have to appreciate that this was a giant fire. Let's talk this compared to another disaster that happened in Sweden. The Västmanland fire in Västmanland province of Sweden. This was in 2014. The area was affected was 34,000 acres, so it's a little bit smaller, but still a very major fire. Ours was 40,000 so far. Its structures damaged was only 25 buildings. I mean, that sounds like nothing compared to us, and only one confirmed death. And this was their cause. It was ignited by a spark from a forestry machine when they were trying to work in a clear-cut area. I mean, basically, this was just an accident that happened, but it was of human origin. That particular thing, so the LA fire was larger, death toll substantially larger, and there was a really big damage that happened because it happened in this thing called the Boreal ecosystem in Sweden. The Boreal ecosystem helps contain the carbon, so it actually plays a big role in kind of containing all the carbon combustion in the climate, and that's helped with climate change and whatnot. And here in the LA fire, I just don't even know how to estimate how this is going to affect climate change here, but just the pollution in the air has been absolutely unbelievable and so hard to breathe. Do you go out with a mask, Brian?
I try to. I don't always, which I kind of beat myself up for it because I'm like, I should. I know I should. But then it's like you hardly see people wearing masks around that you're like, is it safe? Although it's like cleared up, you know? I mean, there's definitely talk about that it's horrible and it's going to be for like months that it's going to be like the bad air pollution. So I'm trying to wear my mask as much as I can.
Well, I think it's something to happen. I have a client who lost everything, who said to me kind of something interesting. We live over in the Hollywood, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills area, and he said, "Well, you go over there, and it's as if nothing has happened." And where they are, which is on the west side, it's just, I mean, people keep using terms like Armageddon and what other terms do they use? Apocalyptic and just all the A terms, I guess.
Are you wearing your mask?
I did wear it when I walked to the gym. I can always tell because I can feel it in my lungs, because when I was a kid growing up here and we had smog days, I could always feel it in my lungs. So it's funny to me that when I felt it in my lungs, I'm like, oh, that's that old feeling I had. And then I put on a mask, you know, and that made it better. Also, my eyes water.
Yeah,
continually.
I can feel it in my throat as soon as I'm outside for a while, where I'm like, oh, it's getting me, you know. But yeah, I feel like everybody should be wearing a mask, or at least being careful, you know.
Well, you know, I think I only wanted to look at the fire in Sweden because there was a study done about it that kind of tells us the experiences of evacuees versus non-evacuees that I found to be true for here in Los Angeles. Some of us were close to fires and were evacuated. Some people evacuated of their own accord because they were close enough. And then there were people who were not in an evacuation zone who chose to stay, and they're fine. Because I think that they were very good this time about saying where the evacuation zones were, and those were very serious, and what was still okay, and you had to watch it because things changed over time. But this study tells us what it's like to be evacuated, and the people who are evacuated, and this is important, experience stronger psychological effects than those who are not evacuated. And that may be for a variety of reasons. One, because it brings the reality of the danger it makes it very real, and you have to experience things. Like you have to pack and leave. You didn't evacuate?
No, but
Okay.
I also grew up in San Diego as a kid, and I've experienced like a big fire before, that I know when things are serious, like you got to take what's important, easily grabbable, and go. Like this isn't like something to play around with, which some people that didn't grow up in California might have had like this misunderstanding on like, hey, this is a real emergency. Like you need to get up and leave right now.
Well, when I evacuated, I brought really stupid things. I mean, I'll admit it.
Like what?
I'll admit
Tell
it.
us.
Well, I mean, I got out a suitcase. First of all, neighbors like, do you have a cat carrier or a pet carrier? So I did have one. My cat passed, but I still have the carrier. So I went and got it to her. And then I'm thinking, oh, I better pack. What do I bring? Oh, I have work. I better bring work clothes. So first priority was work clothes, shoes, underwear. I'm like, what else? And then I brought, oh, well, I don't want this to get smoky. And then I'm realizing, you know, everyone's leaving. Like all these cars are going up and down the street, speeding. Like everyone is going crazy. You really felt the tension in the air. Plus, it's getting smoky. And what's so funny is that the ash is falling like snow. So you're like, what's going on? And then I pack up my bag with whatever I packed it up with, just dumb
Your
stuff.
outfits.
My outfits. I wasn't thinking rationally. I admit it. I was like, well, I was thinking about the next couple of days. I got to have enough to like last me the next couple of days. Not, I may not come back to my house. I really wasn't thinking along those lines. Luckily, my house did not burn. But I didn't bring passport. I didn't bring eyeglasses. I didn't bring like normal things that if I had thought about it, I would have thought that's important to grab, you know? So I'm like, whatever, I can replace everything, you know?
But not your clothes.
Not my clothes. And not like like a drawer full of old photos.
You
That
didn't
would
grab
have been a
that?
great thing to grab.
Oh wow.
Your
Didn't-
passport would have been a great thing
Great
to
thing.
just grab.
Would have been a great thing. My favorite was on Jimmy Fallon. One of the staff, they had the little boy pack his own bag. He packed 10 pairs of underwear and a bag of his baby teeth. That was it.
I mean-
that was the entire bag.
I mean,
He's pretty smart with the underwear, I gotta
Yeah,
say.
Yeah, no, usually kids
yeah,
don't
baby
think of
teeth,
that.
yeah.
I had a friend take an espresso machine where I was like,
Huh?
"This is what you're packing."
Hey, you know that everybody I talked to who had to evacuate was fundamentally irrational in what they took. Like they took some good stuff and other stuff that they're like, why did I take that? Like, so I think it's because in that moment you're just okay. I'll grab this and this. You just
You
think
think, I'll
very
be back in a few hours.
yeah. You don't think long range. What do I need? You don't take a 10,000-foot view. You just think grab, put it. I'm like shove it in the suitcase. That'll fit. Zip it up. Then I open my back of my car. All this ash is flowing. It's like it snowed in there, and I'm like, get that stuff in there. But I mean, I don't mean to laugh. I'm laughing at myself, not at the actual thing. But so the people who were evacuated had some interesting things about them. They had more frequent, vivid, and detailed memories. They call these flashbulb memories, where they actually think about things. They actually see the images. And non-evacuees who were just watching on TV or social media were less affected. They didn't have social media back then, but I mean, they did, but not very much. Flashbulb memories, just to talk about, are exceptionally vivid and detailed snapshots of the event, and they're common in disasters like 9/11 or hurricanes or all kinds of things like earthquakes out here we have. The impact is an altered self-perception and worldview. So you start to see the world differently. And I talked about this in last week's podcast when I talked about that trauma changes perception. We have to remember that. And we often give that the short shrift. Like somebody went through a traumatic event and we're like, get over it. The world's not that way. Yeah, you weren't like this before. No, I mean, people actually change the way they see the world after trauma. So we can't be so condemning of them.
Yeah, I even had this guy from the gym tell me how he hadn't been sleeping for a few days. That I'm like, I don't think he evacuated, but the fact that it was just being on edge so much caused him that I'm like, I would have never even thought. I mean, yeah, the first 2 days, or like when the fires were still going on, yeah, I could see that happening because we're like, what if there's like an alert that we need to evacuate or something happens? But it really does cause like a big effect in the long run. I feel like everybody got affected somehow here in LA.
Everybody got affected. Yeah, I don't know how you could be in the metro area and not feel something. And we could put up some images if you don't mind,
Please.
Tony. That'd be great. So survivors recall sights, sounds, and smells vividly. It's an amazing how impactful this was and how it affected so many people. And it affected communities that may have been expecting it. A client of mine told me about the Palisades, that there are communities in the Palisades, just as in Malibu, where they're evacuated frequently, but then their houses don't burn. But this was the exception. This moved in so fast. People just didn't have time to get out. I mean, they got out, but they got out sometimes just in the nick of time. I heard so many stories directly from people like they couldn't even see. They couldn't see because there was a cloud in front of them, just smoke in front of them. That they were, that they didn't believe it at first, that it would hit them. So it's amazing how much it affected people. The psychological impact of evacuees long-term, they have more long-term effects. They have frequent haunting and intrusive memories and greater emotional and existential impacts, existential questioning about their own life, about their own livelihood, about what's going to happen in the future.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
about, I know the emergency personnel such as firemen, policemen, they deal with these traumas on a daily basis, but when it comes to this size, what do you feel that even as a fireman that may know people in these areas or may live in these areas, or going to this extreme of a event that happened like this, how do they deal with it?
It's a really good question. One is the profession of being a fireman, whether it's something of this magnitude, or it's just the general duty that they go through, because they have to deal with this kind of thing on a regular basis, including recovering burnt bodies, and or even they do more than just fires. They do recovery of all kinds of things, and they deal with people who have medical emergencies a lot. So they have to deal with death and near-death experiences quite a bit. It doesn't necessarily make them immune from it.
Right.
But
I would think
there are a few factors, which we'll talk about when we talk about with helping others, that are helpful. But one is that they are in a community of people who provide them support,
Right.
and that they all experience this together. The other thing is they're taking action to stop a fire versus having to evacuate from a fire. It's a different stance. This is like in medicine, when someone, let's say someone comes to you and they have a terminal or difficult disease, let's say, you don't take on the responsibility of that disease when they come into you. Your only job is to try to help them. And if you can lean into the helping, that will help you as well. So if you can be a helper, that makes a big deal, a big difference. It's really about action over, doing nothing or just worrying about something. They take action. So I think that's very helpful. We'll talk about things. It doesn't mean they don't still have PTSD and other kinds of psychological illnesses, and that does happen. But I do think there are some very helpful things to be about being a fireman. It doesn't make it better. I think one thing about the firemen was so impressive. We had so many firemen from all over the world. It was crazy, not just over the United States, but over the world. That was crazy. We had prisoners who were out there clearing brush. We had, people just, it was amazing the amount of bodies that were out there doing good work.
Yeah,
And
we were driving through Pasadena yesterday, and we saw an Oregon fire truck.
Yeah.
Which I honked and waved just because it was really nice to see they traveled all that way.
Yeah, and we're a long way from Oregon. The people think because they're a neighboring state, people don't appreciate how big California is. Yeah, we're a long way. Okay, let's talk about Hurricane Katrina. I just wanted to touch on that. Hurricane Katrina was another great American tragedy. That was back in August of 2005. Nearly 2,000 deaths from this hurricane, widespread destruction, and that was $150 billion in economic costs at that time. Common psychological reactions, and this is what we should expect in people who've experienced the fires here. Grief, panic, loss, fear, sadness, behavioral symptoms like difficulty sleeping, anger, irritability, guilt, and survivor's guilt, feelings of why them and not me. And this is happening even in areas where people have a house that somehow survived or partially survived when it's incredibly like here, smoke damage, and Katrina, it seemed like everything flood damaged was just taken out. I mean, water is very, very destructive. So it's amazing how much this impacted people. There were a minority, and this is true in firemen, as you were just saying, or firefighters, also in other personnel who help, people who experience things. There are individuals who experience long-term prolonged disturbances. So that would be things like PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders, and substance abuse. Those can come to be, but they don't have to. I think that's probably one of the greatest things that we can know, is that most people who experience trauma will not go on to develop one of these trauma disorders. I mean, I think that's good news. And that a lot of people do experience it acutely, which means in the short run, but they don't experience it necessarily long term. It could cause, though, a change in how they see things, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to suffer emotional disturbance, which is nice. So symptoms lasting over 1 month may require more help. So really the first month is very, very key. And typical things that happen in the first month, which is not unusual: nightmares, avoidance, irritability, panic attacks, changes in mood or appetite. But if those go on beyond 1 month, then perhaps we can start talking that this might be more prolonged. Okay. I'm just skipping. Here we go. Vulnerable populations: children, elderly, first responders, those are the fire people, and those with prior trauma. That's actually a very key point, was having a prior trauma can make you more susceptible to experiencing a trauma reaction. So even this could be if you were bullied a lot in school, that could actually make you more susceptible to a trauma reaction with these fires, which I know they don't seem connected. But any kind of threat to livelihood or threat to your well-being can actually play a role. So people who do experience a prior trauma, actually do have more problems. And what we've seen is people who experience multiple hurricanes or multiple fires do tend to have more of a trauma reaction. So if you live in an area where you get a lot of them, that can start to wear you down. Maybe the first one won't, but it could start to wear some people down. Let's talk about coping. So traumatic events and disasters can evoke a wide range of emotion, which we talked about, and there is no right or wrong way to feel about something. Do you get lulled into thinking there's a right way to think about this and a wrong way?
No, but I do think we all have like our opinions on how like we would expect somebody to move about this. But I mean, everybody has their own experience and everybody handles everything differently. So you can't expect anything, or people to behave or react a certain way when this has happened. It's like with grief, like everybody has their own way of dealing with it.
And in fact, this is a form of grieving. Grieving is a piece of this. With this trauma, because they have to grieve here the loss of a community, the loss of a house, and maybe even the loss of a loved one. But when you lose a house, you lose everything in the house. You lose all your memories with that house. You lose, just the little paperwork. I talked to someone who lost his house, who said throughout his day he's confronted with something else he lost because he didn't think of that, or he goes to get this, or wants this thing, and it's all gone. Every bit of it.
Sometimes it's like just something that they worked for their entire life.
Yeah.
And it's just snatched out of their hands right then and there.
Didn't Billy Crystal lose his house?
Oh, did he?
I
So
think
many
But
celebrities did.
I saw him on Jimmy Kimmel before he lost his house during an interview, and he was saying, all the movies I've ever been on, I have the hat from City Slickers. I have this, I have this, I have this, and it's always at his house, and he lost everything from all the memories from all the movies he was on. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. See, that, yeah. I was telling Dr. Greg, too, how I ran into a friend who lost her house, and I was just like, I'm just so glad you guys are okay. And it honestly seemed like she would have rather not been,
Hmm.
you know? And that was sad. Like, that was heartbreaking
Yeah.
to be like, damn, like, it's people's lives pretty much that they lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, the loss of possessions can take a serious emotional toll. Grieving is a natural response, as we talked about. Grieving can include sleep problems, as we talked about, physical complaints like, oh, they might feel sick, nauseous, pains, aches, back problems, changes in eating habits, and children might experience more nightmares, separation anxiety, clinginess, like they don't want to leave your side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be quite big. Let's talk about coping. The key, just to tell you, is adaptive coping, not reacting, which is too loose, like, just kind of bouncing around like a pinball, just bouncing off of things and getting angry, pissed, etc. And it's also not being too rigid or following a script of what you think should be. Well, I need to do this, unless that's helpful to you. But most of the time, that's a little constraining to people. We think about adaptive coping as kind of approaching the moment by moment, and just doing what is needed in that moment. Let's talk about some coping tips. I was joking right before this podcast that I think some of these are they're just a little bit, they don't appreciate the magnitude of what people have gone through. This is from the SAMHSA website about people who have experienced disaster. And it's hard to say these and with a serious face but they're good pieces of advice. But it's coping tips for self-care: eat healthy, avoid alcohol and drugs, exercise regularly, practice deep breathing, although not outside, take a walk to manage stress, and get good sleep.
I don't think we could do any of those during this. I think the drugs and the alcohol would have been like the best help.
Well, I don't know about that.
I mean, during the time,
I would have
just,
been, I would be understanding.
Yeah.
I do true confession, that when we evacuated, went to a friend's house, and I marched in there, and these are people from Texas, so this is speaking their language. I said, okay, dry January ends tonight. We're having a hurricane party. And that's exactly what we did. Okay. Tips for emotional support: reach out to family and friends. Talk to someone you trust about your feelings. Let children know it's okay to express emotions. Limit news consumption. Oh, my God. You know what? I talked to so many people who lost everything, and they had to tune out the news because there's so many people saying crazy things. And here are people that have suffered a serious tragedy, and that there are people on the news saying very ugly things. Luckily, the local news here has been really good.
I feel like the community within LA has been amazing throughout this.
Really,
like, that was
really
beautiful to see.
amazing. Yeah. Avoid constant updates on things. We all became, there was an app out here called Watch Duty, which you could subscribe to, and it would tell you about how the fires were progressing and where the evacuation zones were and everything. It seemed like everyone was on it. And it would send these constant updates, but I could see how at some point that could just be re-traumatizing or problematic. Focus on factual and, again, actionable information. So it's doing something is going to be your friend. Establish a routine with regular meals and sleep schedules. Avoid major life decisions after a disaster. Amen to that. Although people are very quickly saying they want to rebuild, I think actually that's a fine decision to make, because that anchors them and helps give them a goal and to go forward with things. I can't tell you, every person I talk to wants to rebuild, which I think is incredible. They're not being thrown by this. But there are many people who will not be able to rebuild. I mean, insurance is not going to come through at the level a lot of people hope. And things are going to take what? They're estimating 2 to 5 years. That's you're displaced for that period of time, maybe longer. It's going to be rough for a lot of people.
Because I couldn't imagine somebody that's 80, 85 wanting to rebuild a house that's going to take 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah.
Then would they sell it then, or what happens then?
Well, I mean, I don't know, to move back in. I mean, I think that it gives people, it's a healthy thing to want that because it gives you a goal to work
Yeah.
toward. So I think it's a good goal. What you do in 3 to 5 years or whatever from now is really up to you. You could sell it or do something else. I mean, it's up to the person.
Yeah.
Another is to spend time in nature or care for pets. Care for pets.
We can't really go out in nature right now, but later, yeah, and pets for sure.
Let's talk about helping children. With children, we want to be a calm and reassuring role model, but it's okay if they see you cry or have stress. That's okay. They know that children are very resilient. They do look to their parents for strength. They also know their parents have feelings. Encourage open conversations and validate the feelings the child may be having. Also, create a self-soothing kit for the kid, which has comforting items, focus on age-appropriate explanations. I actually have a rubric I use for telling children difficult news, whether it's divorce or something like this fire or something else, is to be truthful, that the parents be truthful, be age-appropriate, and show a united front. It's actually not helpful when the parents fight each other and disagree in front of the kid. Also, good old, who was the guy on Mr. Rogers? Oh my God, it took me a minute. Good old Mr. Rogers. He would always say to kids, look for the helpers. And that wasn't a hard thing to do here. There were so many helpers and so many people coming together to do things. So look for the helpers because they are actually the ones that represent the strength. I think it's good for adults to do that too. Let's talk about warning signs you may need help. Persistent symptoms. We talked about intrusive memories or nightmares of the disaster. Generally, if they go past 30 days, that's going to be a problem. Extreme distress at reminders. So just if you see pictures of it or you're just avoiding things altogether, like I won't drive to the west side or I won't drive out like down the 2 out to Altadena. Sleep disturbances, irritability, panic attacks. And panic attacks can present in different ways. Often people who are having a panic attack can believe that they're having a heart attack. So it may present physically, which, if that happens, that they believe they're having a physical heart attack, they go into an ER, and then the doctor tells them this is a panic attack. That's very helpful information because if it happens again, then they might have something called panic disorder, and that would definitely need or tell you that you need to get professional help. What's one of the most treatable psychological disorders, if not the most treatable psychological disorder, and you can do it without medication, which is so exciting to me, but a lot of people will just suffer for years without getting help. What was your question? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was wondering if can you get a panic attack so bad that you have a heart attack or no?
I mean, theoretically, I suppose, but
Or it's just not really likely. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I do panic attack treatment, I do have them have a workup first to make sure there are no cardio issues, because what we do is actually take them through a panic attack as part of the treatment.
God. I mean, I've never had one. That's why I'm curious. Like,
I
hope I never do.
Try to induce one.
No, I'm okay. It's happening.
Experience
already.
it. It does feel quite bad. The people who are having them feel quite helpless. And it's one of the most painful psychological experiences you can have. So it's a difficult one. I certainly don't feel for anyone who has it. That's why I'm such a strong believer in getting it treated if you have such a thing. Also, people who may become more involved in substance use or loss of interest in activities. An interesting thing I've known about myself for years is I don't like to drink when I'm sad or traumatized or anything like that. Only when I'm happy.
Oh, that's good.
which is frequently.
That's cool.
a
Yeah,
lot.
because I feel like it'd be the opposite way most of the time.
No, but I feel like people who drink like just primarily to treat sadness and things, that can actually make things much, much worse. Also, losing interest in activities, the people who just kind of lose interest in everything and just stare at the wall.
It was cool. Even the gyms were giving out free like week passes to people that were affected by it, which I'm like, that's kind of nice. I know it sounds dumb and like the big aspect of it, but like to really take some time to just kind of focus on something physical that you can control, that like will give you like, you know, some serotonin in there. Just I feel like it was a good call, you know.
I don't think there's a place in LA that doesn't have like a fire victims box or is offering things, or that you can't give money or goods. It's just
Food,
everywhere.
you saw restaurants even giving out free
Restaurants
food. Yeah.
or grocery stores. I mean, it's crazy. Again, like this city just came together, and whoever has a negative view of Los Angeles, I hope this breaks it, because it's amazing to see the people of LA come together like this. Okay, so let's talk about helping others. Helping others. We made a lot of mistakes in helping others in the past. There is something called critical incident stress debriefing, which was used a lot with firefighters, police, who've experienced trauma, and after they experience it, we'll usher them into a counselor and try to make them tell their story. Critical incident stress debriefing generally happen 24 to 72 hours after the incident, when the incident could be a traumatic event. And what we discovered is doing that actually made some people worse. So that has been largely abandoned. Now I think it started with a good reason, because that is the treatment you want to do with someone who goes on to develop PTSD. When they develop PTSD, I say, with a trauma, it's like you're carrying a deck of cards. It's all perfectly ordered, like straight out of the box deck of cards, and someone came behind your back and slapped that deck of cards out of your hand, and it just went everywhere. That's the trauma. So when we experience a trauma, we try to put things back together as quickly as possible. It's as if we put all the cards back into a pile. Didn't matter which way they were facing or what order they were in. All the cards go back, and that if we don't reorder it, it can actually cause us psychological problems. So some people do that naturally, but some people might need some help, and they might need help through the process of PTSD therapy by helping them to be able to tell their story. But you don't want to do it too early, because a lot of people have a natural capability to do this on their own, which you want to help them lean into. That actually helps them. So we've now developed something called psychological first aid. So psychological first aid is a process after PTSD. It's developed by the National Center for PTSD, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. It was developed in 2006, and it's very, very recent. So Red Cross, American Psychological Association, they all signed on to it. This is a really good therapy. But it's a therapy that's kind of interesting. The core components are to protect individuals from further harm, provide opportunities for people to talk about their pressure to talk about their issues without pressure. You don't go, tell me everything. You say, tell me everything, and they say no, you should say, okay, like, cool, like, that's fine. Use active listening and show compassion. Acknowledge and address concerns, and discuss coping strategies and connect them to social support. What I love about psychological first aid is it doesn't look like therapy. It looks like someone who's there to help. So the steps in providing psychological first aid are contact and engagement. You establish rapport. Hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And then you start to provide physical and emotional safety. What can I do? Do you need water? Let's get you over here. Let's try to hook you up with things. Stabilize them. Stabilization is to help reduce immediate distress. If you can see that there is something happening, you can try to address that. You can do some information gathering. What are your needs right now? What are your concerns? My concern is my animal, my children. I don't have a place to stay. We're hungry. It could be a variety of things. But you just gather that information and then try to provide practical assistance. Try to go do with the most urgent things first. None of this looks like doing therapy.
No, I saw this on a show recently too, where there was a fire in this building, and they even had a priest come and like help and just like talk to the people. It was like just how you mentioned. It was like they were just making sure they were okay and just tending to whatever they needed.
And if that means sifting through the rubble, or helping them in whatever way, or handing them bottles of water, or getting food for them, this is all part of it. This is providing really practical assistance and connecting people to social supports, like trying to get family together, because sometimes people get separated, getting friends, getting people connected to social resources. So I love this approach because really it just approaches people where they are in the moment that they're suffering, and what can we do to help. That to me is ideal psychological therapy. The actual in the room tell your story stuff, that's later. So let's talk about, let's talk about the do's and the don'ts of psychological first aid. So let's talk about the do's first. Safety. You want to help people meet the basic needs of food and shelter and obtain emergency medical attention. You want to provide simple, accurate information on how to obtain these things. The next is calmness. We want people to be calm. Listen to people who wish to share their stories and emotions, because some people will want to talk. They want to tell you everything. And remember, there's no right or wrong way to feel. Someone could be laughing. Someone could be crying. Someone could just be like in just a fog. But none of it's wrong. Be friendly and compassionate, even if people are being difficult, because some people will get kind of angry and ornery with you. But they're going through a trauma. We have to understand that. Provide accurate information about the disaster or trauma and the relief efforts, and that will help people to know, okay, I understand this situation and what to do. That really does help people. Connectedness is another tenet. Help people connect, contact friends and loved ones, keep families together, keep people together. Do not separate. We saw that in a very, very ugly way with the border crisis, when they separated families, and that created permanent trauma. But here you can see that it's easy for people to get separated in a disaster. So doing whatever you can to keep people together can really help. Self-efficacy. Give practical suggestions that encourage people toward helping themselves and meeting their own needs, because people generally want to help themselves, but they generally don't know what to do. Give hopefulness. Direct people to locations of available government and non-government services. And if you know that more help and services are on the way, remind them that there is more help and services on the way. Remind people when they express fear or worry. I saw this happen in North Carolina. I saw people on TV thinking nothing was happening when there were reports of people trying to get to these people, but yet they couldn't because of this or that, physical barrier. So it was interesting to me, and the reporter obviously was putting a microphone in front of them. I almost wanted the reporter to say, why don't you tell them this is happening? Because, they were reporting it like another reporter had just reported what they're trying to, and that they're aware of the situation, and they were trying to get help to these people. But nonetheless, that was what happened. So we just want to keep things real. Let's talk about the don'ts. Don'ts, a lot of people can make big mistakes. Don't force people to tell their stories. Don't force them to share them, especially very personal details. That can decrease the calming. They'll feel worse. Don't give simple reassurances like, everything's going to be okay, or at least you survived. That often diminishes calmness. So it's, the one thing you want to say is, you could say, I'm glad, I'm so glad you're here, and we're going to do everything we can to help. Don't tell people what you think they should be feeling, oh my God, or thinking, oh no, you should be more upset by this, or you should be less upset, or, we have help here for you, so don't be so upset. I mean, people are just going to be how they are. We don't, or how they should have acted. Oh, you should have left earlier. I've hear things like this. Yeah, maybe they should have, but they didn't. You gotta meet people exactly where they are. Don't tell people that you think why they've suffered, or you can say, oh, I can see on your face you look really bad. Here, come here and help. No one wants to be told that, even if they're covered in soot and ash. They don't want to be told how bad they look. They just want to be helped. Don't make promises that can't be kept. I'm sure that, this will all be okay, or that, we're going to get you this and this unless you can get them this and this. Don't criticize existing services or relief efforts in front of people that need these activities. It diminishes hope and calming. This pissed me off here in LA because we saw some of this. The fire chief in LA did this when she went on the news and said, oh, we don't have enough money, and it was trying to shift blame instead of saying, we're out there doing everything we can to help. So all that does is gin up anger and keeps people away from feeling relief or reassurance. In that moment, they just need to know what is going on. It's like you can't just lie to people. You have to give them the exact what to do. Okay. Yeah.
I know with just that about, I feel like it was really easy for people to go on and blame a specific person or politician or something, that I fell into it at first. And then I was like, you know what? It's better to just post what you can do to help instead of blaming somebody about the situation or what could have been done or why was there budget cuts and all this stuff that I'm like, you know what? Let's just focus on what we can do to help the people in need right now, and that can be dealt with later.
Anyone who made a video about what they think is who caused the fires, what's wrong with what people are doing. I mean, there were all these experts doing everything they can, but yet these individuals on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram became all these fire experts from around the globe in different parts of the United States, and they had no idea what they were talking about, but they were doing immense damage because people who actually experience these traumas actually would see them saying these really horrible things. So it was really a very ugly, I think it showed an ugly side of the United States in many ways, the people who were going on and saying such ugly things. But oh well.
But I think it was overshadowed by everybody doing so much for the community. I think that's what we saw more, at least here on the ground. That
say at least locally.
We saw that whatever people were talking crap about it, it was it didn't even matter because everybody here was literally helping each other.
Everyone here was helping each other, so it was really nice. So it did bring the community together in many ways, and I think we're both experiencing the dry air and the whatnot. We're having the winds kick up again, so we're keeping our fingers crossed that the fires won't get worse, but we'll keep an eye on that. That brings us to the end of the show today. That's a good thing because we rushed through a lot of different things and covered a lot of ground. A reminder to subscribe, give us a 5 stars. If you want to read resources, go to the YouTube page, youtube.com/Dr. Greg. I put a bunch of articles that you can read as well as resources that you can click on. Also, if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, hit us up at Ask Dr. Greg on the socials. This is Dr. Greg, Brian, Tony, and Noah all saying goodbye to you. Until next time, be present, be flexible, and be kind.